What a winter it was. It snowed and snowed and snowed. Sioux Falls and Rapid City had much above normal snowfall, while Aberdeen and northern South Dakota were absolutely buried. It was a winter ranked among the snowiest on record, and it lasted way too long. March is supposed to be our transition to spring. Instead, we got more snow and colder than normal temperatures. Sioux Falls got a couple inches of rain on top of it, pushing rivers and streams out of their banks. The snowmelt produced damage that will take quite a while to repair. And April, more snow? It felt like winter would never end. Now, as we turn the page toward the warm seasons, we set our sights on normal, occasionally stormy spring weather. We'll talk about the weather issues that lie ahead on the KELOLAND Live Doppler Spring Special. Hello! Spring is in the air, along with the potential for severe weather. But it was just over a week ago that our powerful storm knocked out power to thousands of people in KELOLAND and dumped 2 feet of snow in some communities. The start of the spring season is one that many of you would like to move past. Tonight, we're going to give you an insight on what type of weather could lie ahead for the rest of spring and summer. Some of you may be eager to get into the fields. We'll explain the role your crops play in our region's weather. We'll also show you the gadgets we have on hand to help keep you safe when a storm is brewing in your neighborhood. Plus, we'll give you some insight into the dramatic changes in a wildfire's behavior.
You know, I still look at that video and just shake my head. Just amazing video. Now, while many of us were ready for a break from the cold and snow, the melting didn't happen gradually, causing an even bigger problem. Rain combined with warming temperatures triggered severe flooding in KELOLAND. Chunks of ice ripped bark right off many trees lining the banks of the Big Sioux River and other rivers and streams. In Sioux Falls, some neighborhoods were even evacuated, but the flooding wasn't just in eastern South Dakota. Flooding on the Pine Ridge Reservation led to evacuations there as well. And once crews wrapped up their mission there, they headed to Eagle Butte in the north central part of the state. But it's the flooding along the Big Sioux that triggered flashbacks for some of us to 50 years ago this month when a heavy spring snowmelt caused historic flooding along the Big Sioux River. The snow was so heavy during that winter of 1968-69 that buildings buckled under the weight. And when the flood hit in April of 1969, volunteers were ready with their sandbags. Truckers also hauled in massive boulders to protect the riverbanks from washing away. The flooding also damaged a pumping station that shut down operations at the John Morrell meatpacking plant, but only for a while.
Yeah, the history of flooding on the Big Sioux River features many events, but none bigger in recorded history than that of April of 1881.
Perhaps you know a few things about the weather leading up to this flood. This is the winter Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote about in The Long Winter. We don't know exactly how much snow was on the ground in the Big Sioux River Basin, but it's safe to say it's much more than anything in modern history. To give you an idea of just how big this flood really was, there are several epic stories of whole buildings being carried away over the falls and down the stream. This included a restaurant, a blacksmith shop, a sash factory, the Queen Bee Mill office, and a saloon with a full stock of liquor and cigars. Needless to say, the wreckage below the falls was a mess. While we didn't have river gauges back then, records of the watermarks were kept and made it possible to create a gauge reading on the Big Sioux on North Cliff Avenue. That number stands at 31 feet, with a volume of 79,000 cubic feet per second. By comparison, the 2019 flood at its worst measured only 16,000 CFS. That's a far cry from the 1881 flood. Even the 1969 flood only reached about half that size of the 1881 level.
All right, and hopefully we never see a flood of that magnitude again. And when it comes to summertime storms, a matter of seconds can make all the difference. That's why we have our radars scanning the skies to give us new images every minute. And we can even adjust the speed depending on the types of updates that we're looking for. Yes, we have a lot of toys here in the Storm Center, and it's all about keeping you informed. Our workstation may look simple with our 8 monitors and 5 keyboards, but this is our control center that helps us keep a close eye on Kettleland. From here, we can control our radars in Beersford, Huron, and Wall. And our storm center is equipped with the latest Barron exclusive technology like Hail Tracker. It uses dual pole technology to track hail swaths. Shear rate also lets us see where the strongest winds are in a storm. And we can also cut the storm in half or project it in 3D to see the shape of the storm, where potential hail core is, or the height of the storm, all of which is very important for us to know what kind of storm we're dealing with. All of these are designed to help bring you more weather information so you can be better informed. And if you have a smartphone, you can have a taste of the Storm Center wherever you go with the Storm Tracker app. It includes a link to some of our sky cams. There are safety net alerts as well, all of which are completely customizable for up to 16 locations. So when watches or warnings are issued for those saved locations, it can alert you within seconds. The interactive radar is much more than just radar. In the upper right, you will see different options for seeing the composite national radar or each individual National Weather Service radars. These images usually update about every 3 to 5 minutes. You can also select the Wall, Huron, or Beersford radars. We usually keep these at a lower scan level so the images update every minute. Scroll down a little bit more and you will find more options like temperatures, wind speeds, satellite images, and future scan models. And your overlay options include National Weather Service alerts, earthquakes or tropical products, and lightning data. Now, lightning data normally costs extra on other radar and weather apps, upwards of $10 a year, but we give it to you for free. So I encourage you to spend some time playing with all the options to familiar yourself with the Storm Tracker app so you can keep yourself safe when you're away from your TV.
Well, we've already had some tornado outbreaks in the southern U.S. this spring. The trend has been for fewer tornadoes in the U.S. in recent years. Here's a look at the trend of days in the U.S. in which we've had at least one EF1 or stronger tornado. From the 1960s to 1990s, we averaged more than 120 tornado days per year. Or about every third day we had at least one tornado in the U.S. In the last decade, though, we've actually dropped to 100 days per year with a tornado. But there is this interesting twist. On those days when we have a tornado, we're actually seeing many tornadoes. Tornado outbreaks involving 30 twisters in a day seem to be on the rise. Put another way, nationally, there's a general decrease in the number of days with tornadoes, but an increase in the number of tornadoes on those days. As far as South Dakota is concerned, we now average less than 5 days per year with a tornado. That's about a third fewer than in the 1960s.
And when conditions are right for a tornado, here are a few terms you'll need to keep in mind. A tornado watch is issued when conditions are favorable for a tornado-producing storm, but one hasn't formed just yet. You do not need to take any action, just pay extra attention to the radar on the Storm Tracker app. A tornado warning is issued when Doppler radar indicates strong rotation or storm spotters report a tornado, funnel cloud, and/or rotation in the clouds. You'll need to take shelter when a warning is issued for your area.
Agriculture is a strong industry in Kettleland, and how a farmer uses the land can have an impact on our weather. We'll explain how when the Kettleland Live Doppler Spring Special returns.
Welcome back to the Kettleland Live Doppler HD Spring Special. Now, area farmers are anxiously waiting to get into their fields, and they need it to dry before their spring planting begins. And the way that the land is used may be having an impact on what's going on with our weather.
Take a look around Kettleland and you'll notice things have changed over the years. Studies from South Dakota State University show that more land is being used for crops. From 2007 to 2012, more grassland went to cropland. This graphic shows the use in millions of acres. The grassland in South Dakota went from 31.36 million acres to 25.53 in 2012. It stayed fairly steady at 25.56 in 2017, while the cropland went from 12.82 in 2007 to 18.77 in 2012. with a slight decline to 18.58 in 2017. Well, that's a lot of numbers, but you can see the difference with this map showing the change from 2007 to 2012. A lot of the switchover from grassland to cropland is found near the James River Valley, as shown in green. It also shows a switchover in the western half of South Dakota, but it's more sporadic. Another study from MIT states the output from 1950 to 2009 shows the corn yield in the Midwest has quadrupled, and the amount of soybeans over that time has doubled. This can be contributed to the improved seeds, fertilizers, and other practices. The study also states the increase in crops gives out extra moisture. That extra moisture has a couple of effects on our weather. First, it cools the afternoon highs as it's harder to warm wet air as compared to dry air. Second, it keeps the overnight low temperatures up. And third, we've watched an increase in the amount of rainfall over the past several years, so the thicker moisture could be the driving force behind our more recent heavy downpours causing flash flooding.
And that extra moisture in our atmosphere is also contributing to our warmer overnights. I'll have an outlook as to what to expect this summer coming up a little later.
If you think the weather pattern lately seems overly wet, you are absolutely correct. The numbers are glaringly obvious, and the reasons behind all of the water are many.
Historically speaking, a conversation about moisture in Kettleland usually revolves around a lack of it. Here in the northern Great Plains of North America, Sioux Falls averages 26.38 inches of precipitation per year. When a year like 2018 comes along, 39.17 inches takes the cake for the wettest year on record. It's part of a larger picture of excessively wet years. If you look at southeastern Kettleland, the Big Sioux River at Akron, Iowa gives you a remarkable testimony as to what is going on. 4 of the top 10 flows are from the past 10 years. Number 1 on the list is the Canton flood from 2014, some of the most intense flooding in South Dakota history. Number 2 is this year, when the river reached 23.8 feet. Number 3 is last June's big flood with all the water from Dune and the Rock River. The reasons behind the precipitation are many. Keep in mind, not all areas of Kettleland have been wet. We can't forget about the drought last year in northern South Dakota. But as a general rule, more moisture has been moving into parts of the plains from a warmer than normal Gulf of Mexico. Scott's story about land use changes is also a significant factor behind the recycled water available for each passing front to produce more precipitation. Even on a global scale, there is certainly more water vapor in the atmosphere in recent years. Even though it's been wet lately, this isn't the first time we've seen a string of really wet years. 1905, 1909, and 1911 all recorded over 35 inches of moisture in Sioux Falls. Those numbers are all in the ballpark of recent history. No one dreamed the Dust Bowl would come along just a few years later. But that's exactly what happened.
And while too much water isn't a good thing, droughts are generally more detrimental to our farmers and ag economy here in South Dakota.
And damage from a thunderstorm isn't good either. To be categorized as severe, the storm will have winds of at least 58 miles per hour and/or hail that is at least 1 inch in diameter. A watch will be issued when conditions are favorable, but the storm may not have developed yet. Again, this is a great time to frequently check our Storm Tracker app for the latest conditions. And a warning will be issued when storm spotters or radar indicates the presence of a damaging storm. This is when you'll want to seek shelter until the storm passes.
Moving from the farm fields to the garden, what you can look for this season if your spring planting is on a smaller scale. Plus, the best steps to take now to make your lawn the envy of the neighborhood.
Welcome back to the Kettleland Live Doppler HD Spring Special. Since wet weather seems to be the theme of the upcoming season, the question of how those in agriculture will manage comes up often.
Wet weather challenges are much different than those experienced during hot, dry weather. Wet, muddy soils often lead to compaction issues. That, combined with plentiful surface water, can be a challenge for roots to seek deeper dirt where nutrients can be found. Mold, mildew, and blight can all be an issue on some of our favorite plants like tomatoes. It's important to be proactive and look for early signs of distress before the problems spread. Your local extension office will have resources to help you diagnose and treat many of these problems. Farmers on a bigger scale also face a different set of factors during a wet year. Planting seasons in recent years have been shorter for many farmers, and the heavy rain during the summer can move nitrogen away from the root zone. Still, there are many fields that have done well in the wet weather if temperatures are warmer, which ironically has happened here in recent years. The key is to avoid patterns that are too cold and too wet for too long. 1993 was a prime example of that combo, and the results were very bad for much of the upper Midwest.
And Scott will give his take on the summer forecast in a few minutes.
All right, a little under 2 years ago, my wife and I took a big step in life and we bought a house. Now that comes with the responsibility of taking care of mowing the lawn and shoveling the snow, which I've had plenty of experience doing because my parents made me do it as soon as I was big enough to push a lawnmower and shovel some snow. But landscaping and taking care of the yard is a whole new adventure that requires a lot of work to help transition that yard from winter to summer.
First of all, you may not think it, but all the snow we had this year was a good thing. It protected the dormant plants from the cold air.
With the snow cover, it's given a lot of the perennials and the shorter shrubs and stuff a good insulation cover.
I had the opportunity to talk with Heath Ziegler, store manager and co-owner of Cliff Avenue Greenhouse and Garden Center, about what goes into transitioning the yard from winter to summer.
With snow as we've had on the grass and stuff, a lot of it's going to be real compacted down and underneath all that snow. So I think the best thing is once it does dry a little bit, go ahead and go out there and rake up some of those real bad spots that are real packed down.
But you should make sure it all dries up, or you'll end up tearing it up and making it worse than it already is, and that really doesn't sound good. Now, some of your plants may have served as a buffet table for rabbits and other animals during the winter.
They are hungry. They're going to go out there and find whatever they can to eat as well.
And if your plants have been eaten a little bit, it's okay. Ziegler says that can actually encourage growth from the bottom of the bushes. It's the trees that you may need to watch out for.
But what you want to watch out for is if they start girdling around the tree trunk itself. Once it gets all the way around the tree trunk, chances are it may not survive.
And if your tree has this kind of damage, don't chop it down just yet. Wait a bit and see if it shows signs of stress.
What I would probably honestly do is just wait until it does leaf out and does start seeing signs of real stress, and it does start going downhill from there. A lot of these trees and shrubs are real resistant to things and do have a great survival rate.
The next thing to consider is your own planting ability. I know Brian and Scott are good at growing a garden, but so far I've only been good at eating their salsa.
A lot of the easier ones would be like varieties of spireas. Those pretty much grow just about anywhere. Daylilies are great.
As for garden plants, you can usually start those around Mother's Day. A lot of those items at Cliff Avenue Greenhouse are already used to the KELOLAND weather, so there's no need to prepare for them too much.
So there you have it. A lot of good information for you beginners out there like me. Now I just have to get out there and do some work. Of course, maybe I can trick Brian into coming over and doing it for me.
Bring all those vegetables to my place and I'll end up making salsa for everybody. As parts of KELOLAND try to dry out, other parts of the country are longing for rain. What we can learn from California's fire woes next. Plus, I'll share what type of summer I think we're in for when the KELOLAND Live Doppler Spring Special returns.
The ground is seasonably wet right now, but the potential for wildfires is often on the minds of people during dry times in western South Dakota. Other parts of the western United States have experienced big fires in recent years, and they've discovered some things about fire behavior during those devastating events. I was recently at a scientific conference in Lake Tahoe and talked with some of the meteorologists and firefighters who are on the front lines. Meteorology is an important component in dealing with wildfires, not only in how they start, but in determining how fires will behave as they grow.
Wind is the primary driver of wildfires. When wind increases, the fire spread rate increases. It also increases the amount of energy that is being released by the fuel. So by fuels, I mean the grasses, the brush, the trees that are on fire.
There were some devastating fires in California last year, especially in newly populated neighborhoods near wooded areas. This one was so intense, it produced a whirlwind with rotating wind speeds typical of an EF3 tornado.
When you have an immense wildfire, it can actually create its own thunderstorm to the point where it's actually making, it can make its own rain, it can make its own hail and lightning, and in this case it actually formed its own tornado. Just incredible fire behavior.
The fight against wildfires is usually won at night when temperatures drop and wind speeds diminish. But the nighttime wasn't especially helpful during last year's California fires.
What we're seeing is, in some cases, we may have fire that burns nearly with the same intensity that we see during the day. So we're not seeing those same recoveries that we normally have. And at nighttime, we make a lot of progress on these fires. So it just causes us to reevaluate and sometimes have to change our tactics.
With neighborhoods being developed away from cities on the edge of wooded areas, the loss of homes to wildfires is almost inevitable, especially during prolonged periods of dry weather. But fires don't just impact people in the hot zone. Even people a long distance away can be affected by poor air quality created by the smoke.
The smoke can travel thousands of miles. We saw that this past summer in San Francisco a lot. We had the Camp Fire to our north that spread a ton of smoke across San Francisco and impacted a large population.
Talking about preventative measures homeowners can take, the folks I talked to said to keep dry brush away from the house. Now that's fairly obvious, but also refrain from using wood chips as mulch near your house. One of the meteorologists said that he saw evidence that wood mulch caught fire very quickly from airborne embers and then spread immediately to adjacent structures.
What we had during the spring with the cool and wet weather looks to continue through the summer months.
We're coming out of a busy winter pattern that gave us steady hits of snow and cold air. The headline during this spring has been flooding. Much of Kettleland and the upper Midwest had to deal with the combination of spring snowmelt and rain. The flooding wasn't just in Kettleland, as it covered an area from the Dakotas and Nebraska east to include Wisconsin and Illinois. By the looks of it, river flooding will be an ongoing battle for some people in the Upper Plains and Midwest. Our pattern this summer will be driven by El Nino. This usually sets up a dominant southern track with the jet stream. In turn, I think we'll be in a northerly flow during much of the summer in Kettleland. This will keep us relatively cool for afternoon highs. As moisture lingers from the floods and with persistent chances for rain, overnight lows will be warmer than average. With that in mind, I think humidity will also be high during the summer months.
Well, so there you go. Expect cooler afternoons, but warmer overnights. And along with that, probably higher chances of rain will continue through the summer.
Well, we've been talking about that. The amount of moisture in the air, as Brian said earlier, is increasing a bit, and we've seen kind of slower thunderstorms. Our trend in tornadoes down in recent years, but maybe the trend for heavier rainfall, flash flooding type situations might actually be on the rise.
Almost what you see is what you get.
Yeah, so it's
So
kind
it
of more of the same. So I guess that would lead to the question, what do folks do? Maybe it's better to install a second sump pump, or if you're doing any landscaping to get the water moving away from your house, that'd be a good thing to do.
And thinking about flash flood safety too. You talk about all forms of severe weather safety, tornadoes and that type of thing, but also with flash floods and just avoiding that current of water and knowing how quickly that can carry away a car, and just knowing that we've had so many areas susceptible to small stream flooding and of course all the river flooding that we are so accustomed to as well.
Yeah, and of course we had a lot of that this year with the river flooding, the snow melt, and unfortunately this may be kind of the start of a trend, as Scott said, with the maybe more moisture in the air. We have to keep an eye on those types of situations. So
Well, and the soil profile is brim full going into this growing season. So there's plenty of water for those crops to pull that out of the ground. And that's one of the main factors we're watching, but there are several in this summer forecast.
Might be kind of a trend here as we head into planting season, a bit on the wet side. Well, that's the KELOLAND Live Doppler HD Spring Special. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've learned something. We'll see you again soon.